the show with your friend and mine. So tell me, Doctor Squee, who's it gonna be this time? We like to hear you talk, and we love to hear you listen. And if you are not subscribed, you won't know what you're missing. So welcome to the Doctor Squee Show. Welcome to the Doctor Squee Show. Welcome to the Doctor Squee Show. Headphones up. Here we go. Welcome to the Doctor Squee Show. Tonight, Squee welcomes. And now here's the man himself, Doctor Squee.
Hello and welcome to the Doctor Squee Show. I'm Doctor Squee and this is my show. I'm sorry to be going up just a few minutes late. That was just due to some problems with broadband. So you are coming to, well, I'm coming to you via my iPad now, but we will not worry about such things. My guest tonight is a horror and acting legend, having appeared in over 210 film and TV projects to date, including Criminal Minds, Cold Dead Hands with Jim Carrey, Three from Hell, Abraham Lincoln vs. Zombies, Age of the Living Dead, Scream Queens, and his new film, The Parish. And of course, the Easter Bunny Adventures as the voice of the bull. Not only is the man prolific, but he's also got range. Please welcome to the Doctor Squee Show, Mr. Bill Oberst Jr. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you tonight? Or today for you?
You know, Dr. Squee, my grandmother used to say, every day above ground is a good day. And I agree.
Excellent. Or in your line of work, it doesn't even have to be above ground. You can just come back.
No, death actually can be a really fun business. I think that's what horror is doing. Like, we're playing with death before it happens. So then when it does happen, before we realize it's not a movie, we're gone and it's okay. But, it gives a little practice.
I like it. And like just here in the UK, as we speak, our Prime Minister is talking about steps for easing our lockdown. How's things for you over there?
Yeah, it's in and out and up and down. It depends on where you are. In LA, it's been pretty bad. Until we reach herd immunity, I don't think things will be normal. So I'm looking personally for Christmas of this year. If Christmas is like Christmas used to be, then okay, I'll say, all right, then things are okay. But until then, I'm wearing my mask and doing my thing.
Well, thank you very much for doing that. We appreciate everyone who's taking necessary steps to keep us all protected. It's very much appreciated.
Dr. Squee, I don't know what it's like there with mask compliance, but yesterday morning I was in a restaurant and a colleague came up I hadn't seen in a long time, no mask, nothing, and stuck out his hand. So I got a maskless person with their hand out, which, a year ago would have been, oh, great. How you doing, dude? Good to see you. But I froze because I can't shake your hand and you're not wearing a mask. And I had to suppress all of that behind my mask and keep my eyes friendly. But I'm sure my eyes were like saucers because I thought, what are you doing?
It's one of those things. I will say this for this country, there isn't many kind of compliments I can give our politicians, but at least they all agree that something's happening. And that's, I think, where we've benefited here, I will say.
That's right. Right.
So you've worked in, as I was saying, just so many horror projects, but what were your horror influences for yourself?
As a child, I'm really influenced by the late 70s, early 80s, sort of, campy, fun horror. The old Roger Corman, Vincent Price pieces. Let's go back even to the 60s. Fright Night. All of those. Yeah, I really like horror to be fun. It can be scary, but I also want it to be exhilarating, kind of like a roller coaster ride. So that's the stuff that I really liked. Of course, in the non-fun category, there was The Exorcist, which remains my favorite horror film of all time. Scared the crap out of me twice. I wasn't old enough to see it either time. I snuck in both times.
I don't know if you're still catching me, Bill.
Horrifying.
we just dropped out for a second. Either Bill is frozen right now, or he's using some extra scare tactics on me. Bill, you there, sir?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I think we lost signal just for a second, but I was just saying about the kind of thing I loved about the 70s and 80s, which I think the modern age of streaming has brought back, is there was kind of like those horror films, which just kind of, it seemed to be just a peak time for kind of horror films coming out all the time. And you, as someone who's worked in kind of so many different styles of production, so you've worked on the kind of big screen ones and the kind of more independent films.
Yes.
Like, I think that was a great time for that during the 80s.
Yeah, I think so. The difference between the big films and the small films is time. You know, time is the commodity, and you have more time on the big films to get the exact shots that you want. And so, what the small films need to do, I always tell a guy or a girl, if you don't have a lot of money, make the movie you want to make. Make the movie that's in your heart. Don't try to do your version of what the big guys can do, because nobody cares. But if you do something that's quirky and unique from your heart, then horror fans are they're a special audience, because they can tell if you're lying to them. And if you're
Yes.
pouring out your heart to them, they'll overlook a lot. But if you're trying to bullshit them, they will abandon you immediately, as they should.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think I've seen so many like wonderful independent horrors which just get the tone and the feeling right. You don't care that kind of like the blood looks kind of unrealistic and some of the effects are kind of like having to be done. Having said that, the creativity as well can be wonderful.
Right.
But you'll forgive a lot for kind of some real kind of genuine kind of scary stuff in the plot.
And you know, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm very into cinema that has its own rules. Like a horror film can decide what the rules are in this world, and as a viewer, I'll go with you. So don't give me the same old boring rules. You know, Ray Bradbury said we know far too much of reality. I know about this world. I want you to create a world and take me to it. So for that reason, the recent years, I've really been into art house and sort of stylistic horror, where it's not a representation of my world. It's what it feels like to be up here. That's where the horror is.
One of the weirdest and one of my favorite kind of horrors of recent years, sorry, we will get onto your work, but just while we're talking generally about the genre, was Tusk. I don't know if you saw that with Kevin Smith's film. So bizarre, so weird, but like you cannot say, like it or not, you can't say it didn't create its own genre.
Yes, exactly. I did a film in Mexico with a young director named Adrian Corona, and he's very into mythology and symbolism, very literate. And he did a film called Dis, and it's loosely related to Dante's One of the Rings of Hell, but it's his own vision of what hell is like. It's brutal, it's offensive from the very first minute, and you cannot watch it without coming away with a strong opinion. And if you don't have a lot of money, to my mind, that's the kind of movie to make, is one that people are going to say, I either love it or it's the worst piece of rubbish I've ever seen. But leave me saying something definitive about your movie. Because if I come out of a cheap movie, and that's anything under $1 million, and all I'm saying is, what's for dinner? The filmmaker has failed.
Yeah, I think it's about just making choices. If like you've made a choice and you've made it kind of like a decision, like you've gone in a direction, like, you know, I may not like that direction. I may not like, kind of may not be my favorite film, but at least you've chosen something.
That's right.
You've gone in you're trying to create a world.
That's right. That's exactly right. And, you know, we mentioned The Exorcist earlier on. That was a big budget movie, but they were following Blatty's novel, and Blatty did that in his novel. He did not follow old medieval descriptions of what exorcisms were like. He created from his own mind, loosely basing on some news reports that he had read. But a lot of what we think of as the hallmarks of an exorcism, what everyone would say, oh, yes, this is how you tell a person's possessed. Blatty made it up.
Yeah.
He made it up. And that's what I love about creative endeavors, is that everything that seems it's been around forever and codified and set in stone, originally it was a guy or a girl saying, I have an idea. It's very liberating, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's also something wonderful about horror where it can do two things at once. It can create its own unique world, but horror kind of has certain staples of the genre, which I love. Like, you know, we'll get on to speaking about the Parish in a bit, but I love the fact you kind of play the priest. Kind of, there's always a religious figure in there, and I love
Yes.
kind of playing about with those kind of familiar themes, but then doing something different.
You have to have strong good, or you cannot have strong evil. You have to have the counterbalancing force, because that brings up the tension, the dichotomy of life. We live, but we die. People can be good, but people can be evil. We think there's a higher power, but that higher power had to have also created the evil. And it's that push, pull, pull. You've got to have that. If all you have is evil in your world, it's just as boring as a strictly Sunday school world where everybody's good. You've got to have the tension.
And like for you personally, you started it. Well, the earliest credit I could find on IMDb, I don't know, like if you had a kind of acting tale before this, was in 2007. Was that kind of your first acting work, or had you done kind of theatre before that? How did you get into it?
I did 14. All I've ever done for a living is acting. It's the only way I've ever made my money in my life. It's been my life. So I did 14 years on the East Coast of the United States doing touring stage. And that was my career. And then I just sort of fell into doing film in 2007 and switched over to doing nothing but film and TV in 2008, which I've stayed with. I do a little bit of theater now, but my bread and butter is still film and TV.
So where did you kind of like break into TV happen and film?
What's that again?
When did you, like, what triggered the switch between kind of going from stage to TV and film?
My father, I had an old MS-DOS computer in 2006, and I knew nothing of search engines or anything. You know, I just typed in the code. It's all I wanted. I was really like sort of a Luddite, technically. And so this computer dies, and God rest it, it was very old. And so I'm looking for the same type of basic, you know, MS-DOS. You know, and my father says, it's time you got a decent ass computer. I'm taking you to Costco. So we went to Costco, and my Germanic father insisted that I buy the most up-to-date software, which came with the webcam, you know, and the whole thing. So it was prepackaged with some programs on it. And one of them was a thing called a browser. Who knew? So, you know, so I opened this browser, and one of the complimentary pages on there is a site called Mandy.com, which is a UK-based acting site. And so I say, film and TV. So I enter my information, and I get a match for a docudrama that the History Channel's doing called Sherman's March, about the American Civil War. And I thought, I was raised hearing about the Civil War, and the character is General William Sherman. And so I had a beard, and I had a blue coat I used for Dickens' A Christmas Carol, and I downloaded pictures of epaulets from the web, printed them out, taped them to the uniform, and the very first time I used a webcam was my audition for Sherman's March. And the director wrote and said, can you come to Washington, D.C. and audition for us in person? I did and got the job. That led me to get an agent in L.A., and then, shortly after that, I started doing horror. Not history, I ended up doing horror.
You see, this is the beauty of like the webcams of the era. You could have had kind of like just something taped on. He wouldn't have noticed on a webcam of that age.
That's right.
Now, like it's high def, it's like really clear what you've done.
Oh yeah, it was very fuzzy then, which I'm sure helped.
That's fantastic. And like, was there kind of a pull for you to go towards horror? Was it just kind of like how it worked out?
The camera sees this. The stage sees this. The camera sees this. And this looks malevolent. And the camera views this as threatening and somewhat frightening. And so, learning that, I learned that I had to either play my face or starve, because Hollywood, and by which I mean the movie industry, has two settings for males: beautiful and ugly. And there's nothing in between. And the ugly guys do character roles, and the beautiful guys do the leading person roles. And so if you're going to be a character actor, to work in mainstream films, really boring, because, you know, you're the third forensic psychologist from the left, or somebody's father or some shit. I don't care about that. But if you have a face like this, then you could do things like lick women's faces and eat human flesh and vomit blood and all kinds of really cool stuff. So I was quite lucky actually to have been born with this when it comes to film.
I think there's just, I think though those are the people who end up with the more interesting careers, those who have characterful faces. Like, yeah, the kind of baby boy good looks kind of can get you so far, but unless you've got something to back that up, you will do a few years and then you'll be on to the next kind of good looking actor.
That's exactly right. But character actors, we can work until we die. And they do. You know, there are guys in their 60s and 70s with variations of this face who are still working. So horror is a very durable genre.
If anything, I think it kind of like it increases your odds as you get on, because the older you get, the more characterful your face is going to become. Like it reminds me of Jack Nicholson. Sorry, I kind of like as he got older, you saw him kind of just getting the looks in his face just getting more chiseled and more drawn out, and kind
That's
of
right.
more interesting it was in every performance he gave. Not that he wasn't a wonderful character from day one, but it's the older he got, the more character and the more he could kind of like just convey that just instantly.
That's exactly right. Not in the horror genre, but Michael Caine is an example of this. He's a great acting hero of mine, and he did a film called Harry Brown. And in Harry Brown, he allowed the camera to explore every crevice of his face. It was a very brave performance. There was nothing hidden, but you could not take your eyes off of this face and the life that had been lived in it, and the watery eyes and every line. It was quite beautiful.
Yeah. And for you, like when you were first working in horror, what was the kind of change like going into a horror set and kind of the things you would end up doing? You just alluded to licking women's faces and doing all sorts of kind of wonderful stuff in horror.
Oh, absolutely. And the type of questions you get asked in horror. Do you mind being naked and covered with blood? Are you willing to do real vomit? Can you eat a worm? These are the type of questions that horror directors will ask just routinely. And sure, yeah, I've never eaten one, but how bad could it be? You know?
Okay, what's the grossest thing you've had to do today?
Right. I actually did eat a worm in a film called Coyote, an art house horror film. And it was grainy. I like grainier. I thought it would be slimy, but it was grainy. Who knew? We did real vomit for that film too, Doctor. And it was an amazing spew of vomit. It was a never-ending stream. We had 3 cameras set up to capture it. It was the middle of the night, and we used this thing they used to give babies to make them vomit. They loaded me up with red vines and colored water to get the spew. And it was, so beautiful. But then in the reviews, people said, oh, well, you could certainly tell that the vomit was a special effect. It's like, we worked hard for that.
And I just think of kind of like how much when you're being sick, it kind of like just convulses your whole body. To do that voluntarily, you are kind of a better man than I.
We had 3 cameras set up, and I'm very proud that the director was on one camera himself, and the vomit was so copious that he laughed and shook, and his shot was ruined.
And did you have to do? Please say you didn't have to do any dialogue after that.
No dialogue. I just laid down for a half hour and then went back to work. It's an indie film.
Nice. One of the other credits which we mentioned up top is Cold Dead Hand with Jim Carrey. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, that was very strange for me. They called and asked me to do it because it was a hee-haw type character, and I'm a Southern guy, and they were going to do this big, elaborate wig. Like a hee-haw was a American television show that played on stereotypes of the South. And when I got there, they didn't actually have the wig, and so yeah, it was a little weird. Jim Carrey was at the time trying to get some parody songs going, and this was a parody song about gun control. So I don't usually wade into politics at all, and probably wouldn't have done it had I known. But it was great to work with him, and I'll tell you how classy he is. There was a shot where I had a gun, and he had to grab the gun, and we stumbled backwards. And he said, just go for it. Just go for it. And I said, well, I don't want to pull too hard. And he was like, dude, just go for it. So I went for it. he goes flat on his ass across the dolly tracks. They cut, and I hear this collective, oh. And Kerry looks up at me and he winks and he says, my bad, shit happens, it's fine. And he gets up and goes back. So he did that for me. He saved me from being a pariah on the set and probably being thrown out. I find that the higher level people are, generally the kinder they are. I worked with Hugh Jackman on a car commercial for a Chinese market, and Hugh was exactly the same way. We're doing a turnaround. We've already shot his side and they're doing my side. So they said, Hugh, you can go back to your trailer. We'll just have somebody feed Bill his lines. He says, no, I'm going to feed him his lines because if it were me, I'd want him feeding me my lines. We're in the same business. And I was like, wow, this is why you're Hugh Jackman. So that gives me hope, as you move up in the ranks in the business, generally, at least my experience has been, the kinder people are. And as you go down in rank in the business, the more likely people are to be petty and mean.
Yeah, I think there can be like those shades of that on any level. It appears like, just class kind of doesn't have a level necessarily. But, the other film which you did, which kind of like seemed to capture a lot of people's imaginations, was Lincoln versus Zombies. And what is it like that? That must be just like in a surreal world of horror already. You're then playing this such a well-known historical figure in such an absurdist kind of situation. Tell us a bit about just getting into that character.
Well, I'm a history freak, and Lincoln is a great hero of mine. Has been since I was a kid. In fact, I have the Gettysburg Address right now in my bedroom, sitting there. I just love Lincoln. I never thought I had the chance to play him because I'm 5'9". But this film, by a weird set of circumstances, they lost their original Lincoln. And in a pinch, one of the founders of the asylum calls me up 11 o'clock at night and says, if I get your plane ticket in the morning, can you go play Abraham Lincoln for 3 weeks? And I said, well, I have stuff. And he said, well, we'll take care of it. Just, I need you to do this. And I said, I'm 5'9". And he said, you can stand on a box. I think you're perfect for the role. So the next morning, I'm on a plane to Savannah to play Abraham Lincoln. And I get there, and the director, Richard Shinkman, was there. And I said, what do you want? And he said, I want the Lincoln on the penny, but as if he were fighting zombies instead of Confederates. And I thought, great, he doesn't want a caricature. So it was a lot of fun because I tried to play Lincoln authentically and with respect. He just happens to be fighting zombies.
So how do you kind of like match those two realities? So you're kind of trying to channel Lincoln, but then again, zombies. Like, how do you put yourself into that reality?
I just substituted zombies for the things that he actually did oppose in his life. And it was not, Lincoln would face whatever he came across. He'd be the same, I think. I don't think he'd be thrown for very long by anything strange because he had a very settled, melancholy personality. And once he figured out, all right, so people are rising from the dead and they're eating brains. Well, now let's think about what we can do to stop that, shall we? I think it would be just that simple for him. So that's how I tried to play him.
I mean, it did like feel like a really grounded performance, like because there's obviously I understand the temptation by actors to go kind of larger and larger scenarios, but I think if you are in that kind of like big arena of kind of zombies and you're going to be Abraham Lincoln, taking it kind of like more into the character is the way to go, and that kind of really shone in your performance.
If anyone inhabits heaven, Abraham Lincoln inhabits heaven. And so I hope to meet him one day. And I don't want him to kick my ass because he's a lot bigger than me. I wanted to respect him.
Well, I mean, again, like you may not have the height, but you've certainly got the face for him.
Well, thank you. And Lincoln said, he's so many quotes about his own face. When people accused him of being two-faced, he said, my God, if I had another face, you think I'd be wearing this one?
Again, you've got so many credits. I just want to kind of go through a few of them. So like Hell's Kitty, for me, there's no finer genre of horror than the demonic animal genre. So you played that on film and TV show. Is that correct?
Yes. And so I really, I told you I love The Exorcist, and I've wanted to do a priest doing an exorcism for a long time, and finally got to in The Parish, this movie, which will be out on March 16th. But this was a couple of years before, and I'd actually been praying about this in my evening prayers before bed. As God, if there's a role I can play, a priest doing an exorcism, I would really like to do that. And so then I get a call to play a priest doing an exorcism on a cat. And I was like, okay, you have a sense of humor. This is great. And then they said, well, Doug Jones will be your co-priest. And that made it even better. I love working with Doug. We're kind of like a Laurel and Hardy because he's way up here and I'm way down here. And he's very droll, very dry humor. And it was a lot of fun to work with him on Hell's Kitty. And then that's right. That's the one at the end. I think my priest is the only one that survives, and the door opens up, and then I'm there in this almost sort of like a Christ-like pose with the word pussy written across my chest. So that was a case. I told you the questions horror directors will ask. So The director, Nicholas Tanner, was like, Bill, I have an idea. Do you mind if we have you in just like this sort of a loincloth thing, and we write the word pussy in big letters across your chest? Okay.
I don't think I'll ever look at Saru in Star Trek Discovery the same way again.
That's right.
I do love kind of like, Doug Jones is just fantastic. He's another one of these actors who's just kind of just willing to go where a role takes him. Like, having seen him in, I mentioned Discovery then, he kind of chose to be permanently walking on the front of his feet. Like you, he seems just endlessly willing to kind of suffer for his art if that will make the shot or the show better.
As actors, all we have is our bodies. That's the thing, is that I don't have anything but this from head to foot and whatever I can bring out of it. That's all we got. So for an actor to be asked to do something weird like, can you try to walk on the very front of your feet? Yes, absolutely. Because that's inhabiting the body. The most boring and depressing thing you can ask an actor to do is, can you just sit there or stand there or act like a normal person? I'm not explaining myself very well, but particularly in the horror genre, we get to explore the body because we're all trapped in here. And I can feel my skeleton, which will be exposed when I die, right underneath the skin. It's right there. And I find the idea of the body as a prison, as a thing of horror, to be a really, really powerful metaphor. And I really love to explore that. So I'm glad I've gotten to do some body horror.
It seems like, you're just willing to go. It's like if it's an uncomfortable person, the more uncomfortable you feel, you want to go there.
That's absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Because it explores the limits of the human body. I don't know if an athlete feels the same way. They might, but that's the way it feels. I've never done any project that was good, that was not physically uncomfortable or physically distressing. There seems to be some connection between physical discomfort and hardship and achieving something that really lasts in art.
Yeah. One of the other ones which I've kind of wanted to speak about was Scream Queens. So that seems very celebratory of the whole horror genre. It's brought in so many of the horror icons. Can you tell us about your experiences on that show?
Yes. They asked me to do it. And Jamie Lee Curtis was the director. And she was nice enough to say, I want Bill to do this cameo role. And so, of course, the answer is yes. The answer is always yes. And so I got there and met her, and it was just really wonderful working to her because she wanted this episode she was doing to really pay homage to some of the tactics of the horror films of the 80s, like the jump scare and things like that. She's a very, very charismatic woman, and female directors bring, I don't know how to describe it, Doctor. It's not that they bring a different energy, but they bring an additional energy to the set. And I always enjoy working with female directors. I'd like to work with more of them. But Jamie Lee had this thing that female directors can bring to a set. She made people want to follow her. And when she had an idea, it wasn't like, oh God, we got to do a relighting. It was, yes, we're all really excited about doing this. That was a terrific experience.
I think there's something wonderful, and it may be one of the very few good things to come out of the horrible fact that female directors aren't as celebrated, is that maybe they aren't also as kind of feel as pigeonholed by kind of the expectations, because there's so many male directors. So when a male director does it, they kind of like have got so many preconceptions of what director is. I think female directors are maybe a bit freer to do something different because they're bringing a different energy, which hasn't been seen
They
so much.
absolutely do. And, I know investors know this, but I don't know if the general public knows that the horror genre, which has one of the highest return on investments in the business, only faith-based films and horror are pretty close together. But if you want to make money, invest in either a faith-based film or a horror film. But a large percentage of the audience, in fact, very close to the majority now, is female. There's a strong female presence among horror fans. And so bringing that sensibility to the films is very important. It's no longer a tits and blood genre. You can't make money that way because now there are too many women. I don't mean too many, but I mean now there are many, many women in many, many countries who are looking for this type of fantasy and dark exploration. And tits and blood's not going to cut it for them. So as a result, you started to see horror films explore ideas more.
Yeah, I think so. And like for you, working with Jamie Lee Curtis, I mean, just she's so iconic in the horror world. Like, do you feel any degree of starstruck when you're working with a great like that?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And if you don't show it, then you're not being a real human being. So of course I had to get the selfie, and she was very gracious, and absolutely, I made her laugh too, which I really liked, because my character was kind of comedic, and she showed me what she had in mind, and then I did it, and I tried to do it for the first take exactly the way she did it, which is really funny. And I saw her back there going, and then she tweeted, trying not to laugh, at Bill and Kiki is impossible. And I was like, yes, that's great.
Oh, wonderful. One film which I've seen, and it just says kind of like, it's on IMDb as kind of like mentioned or kind of suspected that you're in. Please say this is a genuine film that you're in, because I just love the title. The Vampire Santa 1, The Beginning. Please say this is an actual upcoming film.
It is a film in pre-production. And I love that title too.
It's amazing. Like, horror film, this is what's wonderful about horror films. You can have just the craziest, most batshit title, which in any other genre would never happen. And it's just I'm so excited to see this.
Batshit crazy is good for our genre. Okay, so yesterday I got a call from a young man who was really excited about this idea that he had. And there's a woman who's transported, like, I don't remember the device, but she's transported onto this very strange planet called Omega something, something, something. She's scantily clad, which I don't know if he can get away with or not. That's his thing. Anyway, when she gets there, there's a gelatinous mass, and the gelatinous mass becomes her protector, and the gelatinous mass starts taking on the shape and the character of people who have played a part in her life. And just the fact that we spent an hour talking about the gelatinous mass shows you that we're in horror. And fans would ask, I said, you know what? Fans are going to like this. A gelatinous mass that can take the shape of many different people in my life. I like that.
Yeah.
It's that kind of genre.
I mean, I suspect the answer to this next question, but like where there are so many different types of horror and so many different directions horrors can go in, is there a favorite genre you've got? Or I get the feeling for you it's more about just the truth of kind of the whoever that person or thing is.
You said, what is there a subset of horror that I like?
Yeah, is there any subgenre you prefer?
I like psychological horror, and I like body horror. I very much like body horror. So if I could have my best, it would be mixing body horror and psychological horror. Yeah, love it.
And like body horror, is that just what we were talking about kind of the physicality of it?
That's exactly right. Jeff Goldblum in The Fly. Transformations, creeping, crawling things, the human body becoming horrific in some way, all whether in real life or whether it's a fantasy. stylized movements of the body, dreamlike movements, all of those things I'm really, really into.
Yeah. What were your favorites that you've got to do in that genre?
Um, they're small budget things, but one was the film Coyote, where we did the vomit, which is an art house horror movie, because he had me do shots where he wanted my character to appear to glide across the floor in a dream, which is just beautiful. Another where there were just movements under a sheet, and you could tell from that what the character, what the body was doing. Um, there was a shot in that in which my character is going out in the woods. He's killed somebody. He's going out in the woods, and he is hunted by an Aboriginal version of himself. And so we did this mud-covered Aboriginal type character with a bow, hunting himself. All of those type of things I love. And a film called Dis, which we shot in Mexico, which involved a lot of body horror and a lot of extreme body stuff. And at the end of it, my character is crucified on sort of an X cross, and a demon comes in a bridal gown, and horrible things happen. Yeah, and he's paying for his sins. It was very uncomfortable to shoot, but it was also hypnotic, because it was I don't know, I guess we try to beautify the body and pretty it up and do it look okay, but just to deal with the raw body as a thing that is decaying from the moment we're born, and a future thing of horror for all of us as it decays in the grave or whatever comes after. That's something we don't do much, and horror allows us to do it. I love it.
Oh, that's wonderful. I've never had it quite described like that. I love that idea. So getting on to The Parish, of course. So my fiance and I watched it last night. Thank you very much for sending us the advance copy to watch. And I love your entrance into this one, because it's kind of like a low-key entrance, but kind of it managed to create such a kind of wonderful atmosphere. So like you're in the church and you're kind of like just whispering across to this mother who's kind of concerned about her daughter. Like, can you tell us about filming that first scene?
I'm glad you liked that shot. Angela DeMarco and David Hogan are a husband and wife production team in Seattle, Washington. They produced this movie, and that shot was their idea. They wanted it to be the first introduction of my character, because they wanted him to be a very hushed presence in the film. So we could barely hear each other. We shot it sitting across from it, augmented later with the sound, but I could barely tell what Angela was saying. But again, it's in real life we wouldn't be able to hear each other, but it was symbolic that he could hear her what she was saying, and she could hear him, even though in real life you wouldn't be able to hear each other that far apart. I quite like that. I like the lighting in that scene. And what I wanted to establish from the beginning was that my character, Father Felix, is hopeful, but he's also weary, because I've known a lot of pastors in my life, and that's the mix. That's the authentic mix of pastors who aren't full of shit, or abusive of people, or full of themselves, or rich, or all of the other crazy, horrible things that people of the cloth do. The real, authentic ones, they're very tired, but they're hopeful at the same time. And I wanted that mix to come across.
It definitely did. I also love the fact that in this film, of course, as all good horror films do, it kind of is a horror film, but it kind of like explores other kind of themes. I love the idea that really this was a film, even told through the horror lens, which is a definite kind of film about loss and about kind of that journey you go through as when you're grieving. I kind of felt that very keenly in there.
I'm glad that you liked that. I was worried that horror fans would not like it, because it was not, you say an exorcism film, like, all of that. It really is a film about grief and about loss. The fans that I've heard from have responded to it really well, perhaps because it came out at a good time, because we're all experiencing a lot of loss now, and maybe it kind of fits where we are as a culture.
How do you kind of get into that character who kind of there seems so many layers on him. So he's kind of obviously a concerned pastor. He obviously, I get the feeling he's going to pass when he's dealt with all this loss and stuff. And he's kind of also a bit of a detective as well. So there's lots of kind of different things to bring into that character.
Several pastors that I've known have gone into that. Some that I've never met, like Father Malachi Martin, who wrote Hostage to the Devil, a real life exorcist. And several pastors that I have known who have acknowledged the presence of evil. And all of them have said it's very wearying to know that evil exists in the world and not to be able to do too much about it, except sometimes in some isolated cases to some degree. But I can't wipe it out. I have to live with it. And even if I'm successful, or through the grace of God, at this instance of tamping down the evil, it's going to come back. I guess it's like a guy who deals with broken water mains, just waiting for the next one to break. But that's the energy that I get from all of the pastors I've ever known who really acknowledged evil and dealt with it in some way, is it's going to come back.
And, you know, I also love the idea that, you know, there's a lot of people who say that it's harder to play a good guy and it's like it just gets boring. But I think kind of if you approach it the way you do, it's about the character. It's not about whether they're good or evil. It's about kind of what drives the character. And it seems like you really kind of, I don't think you shy away from a character who's good necessarily. Is that true?
Oh, no, absolutely not. We're all mixes. Father Felix could be played in a whole other way. They would emphasize the darkness within him. And if he didn't have darkness in him, he could not face darkness. Because when he does face darkness in an exorcism scene, I tried to bring a change in his tone so that he could say, I know this shit. I know who you are, and you know who I am. So now it's real. And then that's something he's never going to show to his parishioners or to the people around him. That's what I wanted to happen anyway.
I mean,
it makes him even, the darkness makes him even more gentle otherwise, because he has to kind of protect it.
I felt also it's like, you know, again, it's kind of a good thing about kind of the fact that horror has delivered us so many different types of priests. You can have the creepy priest, you can have the kind of one who turns out to be a force for evil, one who turns out to be a force for good. And you seem to kind of play with that in this film of like, you know, to begin with, you know, as I say, he's kind of whispering and you kind of just have this scene between the two of them. You don't know at that stage if he's going to be a force for good or evil. It's kind of like, it's very much draws you in that way, I think.
Well, that's right. And on a larger theological sense, this is what priests, preachers, ministers, people of the cloth deal with in thinking about God, a creative entity who we call God, for want of a better word, a mystery within a mystery, who created a world in which evil exists. Even the founding myths of gardens of paradise, in which in the center is a tree of which you may not eat, but it's in the center of the garden. It's the main attraction of the garden, but of it you may not eat. Always this push and pull of why would a creative force do this? What is it made of? It's a mystery within a mystery. And I think the hardest thing, the reason that being a priest or a preacher or a minister is such a tough gig, is because people don't want any of that ambiguity most of the time. They just want answers. My grandma's dying. Can you make her not die? You know, they just want an answer. Can you prove to me that there's a God? No. And I can't make sure your grandma won't die either. All I can give you are some clues to which you yourself can find poetic paths to the mystery. But most people are saying, that's not what I want from you. I want answers. So it's hard.
I also kind of like really felt the fact that there's like loads of the supernatural going on, and obviously there's a ghostly tone to it, but kind of you seem to in this film shy away from kind of a lot of the blood and gore, which kind of, I feel like some horror kind of makers feel like they've got to put that in somewhere. I kind of appreciate that you didn't kind of feel forced towards that in this film. Was that a conscious decision?
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a devil? Are there possessions? I don't know. You don't know. No one can know these things. These are all mysteries. And so I've always felt that the more is left to the imagination, especially after The Exorcist. Anything after The Exorcist. The more left to the imagination, the better, because otherwise you're just getting into laughable gore upon gore. But it's really the horrific idea that our bodies can become vessels for something that's very bad, or are we already something very bad and it just came out? Those are the questions.
I mean, even down to like, and I don't want to spoil anything, but you've kind of alluded to the fact there's an exorcism in this film. Like in that scene, even then it seems like more of a force, a push, which is happening than a kind of like someone necessarily just flying across the room. I kind of like that effect of it.
Thank you. And a part of that comes from low budget filmmaking, of course. If you don't have the budget to do levitations and things like that, it forces you to be more character driven.
And this film was kind of filmed 2019. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Was this another kind of thing which was pushed back due to the COVID pandemic coming?
Yes, absolutely. Scheduled to release and did not because of COVID, and then finally now it's coming out. And it always takes about a year to finish an independent film because you have to do coloring and sound, and nobody has a ton of money for all of those things.
And like, did it just wrap before kind of, so 2019, so probably by the time you finished, it was kind of at least able to film pre-COVID times?
That's exactly right. We did film before COVID, yeah.
Lucky timing, that one at least. How difficult has it been for you as a working actor during COVID times? Have you been able to continue with projects?
For the first few months, it was pretty scary, which I used that frightened energy to create a podcast called Gothic Goodnight, which, knock on wood, has done well, and Audible picked it up, and so yeah, I've been really happy with that. And then about June of last year, filming started up again, and it's all with the mask and the social distancing, but work has not suffered that much. I guess there's such an appetite for entertainment that as soon as it was in any way possible to start working again, people started.
Just putting on the screen, Bill Oberst Jr., you can find the podcast up there. I did notice that earlier on your website.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, if you go to my, although it's misspelled there, it's Oberst.
I'm very sorry. As I say, I had to switch over in the last minute.
Oh, that's fine. Just take off the R, and you guys are good. But
sorry
yeah,
about
right.
that.
There's, in fact, my favorite episode of the podcast is embedded there on the front page. It's the Phantom of the Opera episode, so you can listen to it, and it takes you to the others.
See, this is me trying to be a smartass and adding that last minute to my kind of tags here.
It's a weird name.
Better by now.
It's a German name. It means lieutenant colonel. You hear it in World War II movies. It's yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So before we kind of like move on, just a couple more questions before we wrap up. The movie is out in March, yeah?
That's right. The Parish will be out March the 16th from Uncorked Entertainment on all of the streaming platforms. And I would encourage people to check it out. It's called The Parish.
Awesome. And like the other thing, in fact, like I haven't got it available, unfortunately, right here, right now. But when we play this on the radio version, I will put in the trailer right here if the audio kind of works for that. If not, I just skip past it. But like the other thing I want to ask you, because you've like worked in so many, say wonderful horror films, but you've also done kind of kids shows. What's the kind of gear change in that like?
It's a lot of fun. I started doing voiceover and did more of it during the pandemic. And I got a buddy who I did some horror films for, and then he started doing kids films. And he was like, "Do you want to do some voices?" I was like, "Yeah, I'd like that," because I got the setup anyway to do audible narration, audiobooks. And so the first one I did was a donkey in a farm movie. And I'll show you how critical my Germanic father is, to go back to him. My donkey, I told him, he said, what do you got going on for work, boy? I said, well, I'm, doing what kind of voiceover? I said, well, I'm playing a donkey. What does he sound like? Let me hear it. So I did some of the donkey, like, well, I don't know what happened to the straw. And he said, that's kind of predictable, isn't it? I was like, what do you want? He's a donkey. They're kids. I'm not going to make a bold, creative choice to play a donkey. Actually, I was a little offended.
Yeah, I'm going to do an avant-garde donkey just for these kids.
Right. So my next one was a bull. So I did him a little more avant-garde, and the director was like, "No, I need him to sound more like a bull." I was like, "Okay." So I've done space
Just tell my dad I
aliens,
tried.
farm animals, space aliens, and yeah, I've really have enjoyed. Oh, also I've done some audiobooks for Audible, like collections for kids. I did Russian fairy tales for kids, and it's just full of characters. Like this old man Frost. Frost Ivanovich is his name. And children who don't work very hard and save their pennies get taken down to Frost Ivanovich's ice castle. And he says, "Oh my dear, you should you should have saved your pennies, my dear, because now you will be coming with me." And I love those kind of characters. So it's been fun.
Oh, absolutely wonderful. And is there anything left after all these movies that you kind of still want to play that you haven't yet?
Yes, the Phantom of the Opera, Eric, as he was originally written. And I'll make my pitch here as I've done hundreds of times and hundreds of interviews. The book is in the public domain. You can do anything you want with it. You can read, it doesn't have to be in an opera house. It could be set in a taco stand, anywhere. But the general idea is that Eric is not a man-made freak of nature. He didn't have acid thrown in his face, and he's not a beautiful guy who just has a little disfigurement. He was born so ugly that his own father would never look at him. And his mother only gave him one present in his life, and that was a mask. So she would not have to look at him. And then they sold Eric to a traveling carnival, and that's where he learned to become the person that he is by the time Christine meets him in the novel. And so this idea of a wounded monster who the world made really appeals to me. And that's the gold standard for that character.
Not only do I think that's a lovely pitch, I want to see the Phantom of the Taco Stand now.
Yes,
It's
it
gotta
could
be
be
done.
anywhere. But people are locked into the idea of the opera and the grand sets, and that's not it at all. It's just that how he became what he is.
Yeah. They did the Phantom of the Multiplex, if I remember correctly, we got from the rat hole that's shared there. So it just shows you can set it anywhere. Just finally, like over 210 credits. Like someone who does 100 credits, we call prolific. You are just something else. How do you keep just working so much, doing so many projects, keep the energy for that?
Well, knock on wood, I've gotten to the point now where people ask me to be in them. So I haven't had to, go out and seek. They come to me and say, "I'd like you to do this," or "I'd like you to do this," or "I'd like you to do this." And most of the time, unless it's really something boring or offensive in some, horrible way, I'll do it. And yeah, you just reach a point where you build up enough credit so people know this is what you are and this is what you do. And so if you want the sort of craggy faced guy who does soulful creepiness, there's maybe 15 of us that are really good at that. And depending on what your budget level is, you go to the one you can afford. Yeah, so I told my manager once that our marketing slogan should be, "Because you can't afford William Dafoe." And he laughed.
I've got to say, I'm not just blowing smoke here, sir. I don't think there are many, apart from you and Bill himself, like Mr. Defoe. I don't think there's many others who've got such a kind of characterful look and who does such an explorational characters, who takes it seriously as you do in kind of trying to create those depths and put yourself into so many uncomfortable positions to get where you need to for a part. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. A young director told me that there are two types of creators. There are people who do it to get attention and people who do it because they have to relieve tension. And it feels like the second for me.
Definitely. And before we go, I'd usually do this subtly after we kind of finished and I'd record it with you off mic, but I'm not on my laptop, so I can't record other than doing it right live here. So if you wouldn't mind just doing a little bumper for us for the Dr. Squee show. So
Tell me what I'm saying again. Tell me again.
Just your name, and you're listening to the Doctor Squee Show, and anything you want to rub on it for extra flavor.
Oh, I heard someone who did this at the top of your show that I listened to, who said, "Now put your clothes back on."
That's Mike Fenton Stevens, a wonderful character actor over here.
It really threw me. It was great. I can't top that, but I'll see. You're listening to the Doctor Squee show, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, this is Bill Oberst Jr. You're listening to the Doctor Squee show. Stay tuned. Don't make me go all creepy on your ass.
Oh, sorry. Just one thing I should just ask you that. Can you just say "on the bear" and I'll kind of weave it all together?
Yep. Here, I'll do it. Hi, this is Bill Oberst Jr., and you're listening to the Doctor Squee show here on the Bear. Stay tuned. Don't leave. Don't make me go all creepy on your ass. Yeah, that's it. And that's a creepy voice too. By the way, if I just speak like this, it's not at all frightening. But it's just a simple drop-in register, Doctor, you see.
Okay, I'm off to poop myself. Thank you very much, Bill.
I love it. Thank you.
I've been Dr. Squee, and my guest this week today has been
Bill Oberst Jr.
I'm Dr. Squee, and that was my show. Thanks for watching.